the head of the political wing of Iran's army in Gaza was assassinated. Now, we are now being informed that that was done from inside of Iran rather than from outside of Iran. And Haniyeh has got many people that dislike him for many reasons. He's an arch terrorist with the blood of tens of thousands of people on his hands. He has brought death and destruction where he has been, whilst he lives as a multi-millionaire, major Iranian empire that is threatening the stability of the Middle East, every country where it is. Though, look at Syria. You wouldn't want to live. Right. When Israel wants to take responsibility for assassinating mass murderers, it does that. For example, in Lebanon yesterday, Israel took responsibility, and the big concern is in fact not will it expand into a regional. It started as a regional war. The big question is whether it will expand into a world war. And a major part of that is actually to do with India. We are already nearly a year and a half into World War III. If actually the Americans want to stop escalation into Lebanon, the place where they have to go is to Tehran.
On Wednesday, Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh was killed in the Iranian capital Tehran. This has been confirmed by Iran's Revolutionary Guards and Hamas both. This is a major escalation in what started with Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th last year. And in another instance, Israel claimed it has killed a top Hezbollah commander after carrying out an airstrike on a southern suburb of the Lebanese capital Beirut. These deaths are a significant blow to Hamas and Hezbollah. At the same time, this has deepened fears of an all-out war in the Middle East. To talk to us about the situation in the region, I'm joined by Terry Newman. He is a geopolitical expert, author, and entrepreneur. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Newman.
Good afternoon, Abhishek. Lovely to be with you and with your listeners.
Thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us, because things, as I'm told, remain tense in Israel and, of course, the entire Middle Eastern region. So if you could, at this point in time, give us a lowdown on what's happening in Israel. And of course, we will talk about the assassination of Haniyeh and, of course, the death of Hezbollah leader in Beirut.
Absolutely. So I think, firstly, the framing of what's happened in terms of an assassination of a Hamas political leader and of the chief of staff of Hezbollah is actually it's almost a misframing. We need to understand that there isn't an Iranian empire now. What 20 years ago was being discussed as a Shiite arc is now a fully fledged empire that stretches from Lebanon through Syria, obviously Iran itself at the center, Iraq, bits of the Gulf, and finishing in the south in Yemen, right? And as we've seen in other empires, in every single country, there are local parts of that imperial army. So the Iranian Empire in Gaza is called Hamas. The Iranian Empire in Lebanon is called Hezbollah. The Iranian Army in Yemen are the Houthim. You have in Iraq, So what you actually saw last October was not exactly Hamas attacking. It was actually the Iranian Empire attacking the state of Israel through its local army in Gaza, together with its local army in Lebanon, together with its local army in Yemen. And what Israel certainly has done in Yemen in a couple of weeks ago was to attack the main Iranian army bases there. What it did in Lebanon was again to attack the chief of staff of the Iranian army in Lebanon. And what appears to have happened in Tehran last night was that the head of the political wing of Iran's army in Gaza was assassinated. Now, we are now being informed that that was done from inside of Iran rather than from outside of Iran. And before people start immediately saying it was Israel that did it, let's remember that they immediately said that after the previous president of Iran was assassinated. And then afterwards, people realized it wasn't Israel. Now, Haniyeh has got many people that dislike him for many reasons. He's an arch terrorist with the blood of tens of thousands of people on his hands. He has brought death and destruction wherever he has been, whilst he lives as a multi-millionaire in the best of hotels in Qatar. So the world is a better place without him in it. But we must keep our eye on the ball. And that ball is that there is a major Iranian empire that is threatening the stability of the Middle East, every country where it is. Though, look at Syria. You wouldn't want to live there. Look at
Mr.
Lebanon. You
Newman,
wouldn't want to.
let me interrupt you for a bit and ask you: are you, number one, denying Israel's involvement? Because so far we have not heard any kind of official word from anywhere as far as that aspect is concerned. And the reason I ask you that question, and I'm sure you'll find it reasonable, is because Israel has been known to target its enemies wherever they might be in the world. This has been done in the past, and we can go all the way back to Munich Olympics and what happened in the aftermath. So my question to you is, as of now, have you heard anything about the responsibility of the Israeli authorities? And if not, then who do you think, in your opinion, was behind this?
I think that question is of secondary importance at the moment.
All
And
right.
when Israel wants to take responsibility for assassinating mass murderers, it does that. For example, in Lebanon yesterday, Israel took responsibility
It did.
for the assassination of Muhsin, the same man who was behind the murder of 250 US Marines back in the 1980s, the same man who was responsible for the murder of 12 Israeli Druze children. I can tell you, I went to visit one of the children who was badly injured by this missile. It's horrendous. So when Israel wants to take responsibility, Israel takes responsibility. If it has not taken responsibility, it's for one of two reasons: either A, it does not want to, or B, it has not done it. But the main picture, as I say again, and I think this also affects. Think of India. India, before it got independence, was under the part of the British Empire, right? Now, the head of the British Army in India, yes, it worked according to local considerations, but it got its strategy, its weapons, its training, its budget from London. I'm not making any comparisons between, in terms of was the British Empire as good or bad as the Iranian, but I'm saying that's how empires work. And you now have
I
the
am
same
not for
where
a
you have an
moment.
Iranian empire that is giving weapons and training and budget and strategy. And the fact that Haniyeh was assassinated at the center of the empire in Tehran on the day when they are swearing in the new president of this empire is of huge importance, because it sends a message: no matter where you are, okay, if you are somebody that is coming to undermine the rules of the modern open world, you will no longer be a part of that world.
Right. And not for a second I'm trying to imply that Iran has not been, behind some of the attacks that have happened, have been carried out in Israel against Israel. Of course, we saw the hundreds of rockets which were fired by Iran at the Israeli, at Israel. What I'm trying to ask you, however, is, of course, because the next step after this is going to be the next step in escalation. What are we talking about? Are we talking about an all-out war? Because on one hand, Israel is already fighting, in Gaza. Then, of course, the Houthis in Yemen. Then now, of course, there was an attack on Lebanon's capital in Beirut. Another Hezbollah commander was killed there. And then, of course, what happened in Tehran. So Israel is surrounded by all of these countries, all of these groups, as you were also mentioning earlier. So the question at this point is not whether Iran is behind this or not, but what does it mean for the region? What does it mean for Israel?
So thank you for your question. The way this current war is being framed is that there is an Israel-Hamas war, that we must be very careful that it does not expand into a regional war, because we are also concerned that a regional war could escalate into a world war. Those are the three stages, right? So your question is now that Gaza, the head of the Gaza political bureau has been taken out, etc., and the head of the Hezbollah. And what I am saying to you is, I think that is a wrong framing, and I don't think that's what's happening. What I'm saying is that this started as a regional war. Iran declared war on Israel on the 7th of October. It started as a regional war with Iran attacking Israel from the north, from the center, and from the south. And over the months that followed, it has even attacked directly from Tehran itself, but it's also attacking from Syria, and it's also attacking from Iraq. And the big concern is in fact not will it expand into a regional. It started as a regional war. The big question is whether it will expand into a world war. And a major part of that is actually to do with India. Because as you're aware, on the 10th of September last year in Delhi, your prime minister signed on the official opening of the IMEC, the India, Middle Eastern, European Economic Corridor, which is in effect, it's the coming together. There's two major global forces coming together. There is the pro-Western, pro-democratic camp that is India. It's the pro-Western monarchies. It's the democratic countries. It's Europe with the United States. And on the other side, you have Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, right? And that's the big question. The big question is this regional war, in effect, like during the Cold War, where you could look at a war between Egypt, Syria, and Israel. But, we have to be careful it doesn't expand. But the entire war was started as part of the Cold War. And what we are seeing now is what's happening here is actually part of the Russian, Chinese, Iranian attempt to stop Israeli, Saudi Arabian normalization, because that is the missing link of the IMEC that your prime minister signed last September.
Now, I'm with you on that because, of course, all of the big powers are involved in that region. US plays a certain role. Russia, Iran, China, of course, have a role as allies of Iran. And India, of course, has had, over the last few decades, has had a reasonably good relationship with Iran, but it enjoys, a very good relationship with Israel as well. And there's been, in terms of the kind of exchanges which are taking place between Israel and India now, it's unprecedented, right? It hasn't happened in the past. But having said all that, the fear that you're expressing, the fear that you're talking about, that it doesn't end up snowballing into a bigger war, a world war, as you're trying to put it. What can Israel do? What can the rest of the world do to ensure that does not happen? Because that's, of course, not good for anybody.
So, if I was to ask you, when did World War II start? What would you answer?
I would say it really started the day Hitler decided to, invade countries around, persecute Jews. It pretty much started on the very first day. It's another matter that the official beginning of the war was on a particular date.
So Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia. It was not the start of the war. Hitler invaded Austria. It wasn't. When Hitler invaded Poland, that is given as the start of World War II in September 1939. Yeah. At the time, people did not know that was the start of World War II. Remember, America had not officially come in because of the Japanese and Pearl Harbor, right? So when that happened, people thought this was just a regional war. They didn't realize. Afterwards, they looked back and they said this was the start of World War II. My sense is that when historians look back at what's going on, they will say that the start of World War III was when Russia invaded Kiev. And so therefore, when we are saying we must be careful, as the initial framing that the Hamas-Israel war doesn't turn into a regional war, doesn't turn into a world war. In actual fact, what started as a regional war in order to prevent Israel-Saudi normalization, in order to prevent the IMEC, because that is Russia's control over Europe. And that is also the biggest answer to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. So my sense is that whilst we must be very careful about minimizing the dangers of expansion into a world war, it might actually be that when historians look back, they will say that at this point, we are the 31st of July, 2024. We are already nearly a year and a half into World War III. And if that is the case, I have to say that, if I was to choose the side I would want to be on, Would I want to be with India, with America, with Britain, with France, with Germany, with Japan, with Australia, with South Korea? Or would I want to be in a team with Russia, with North Korea, with Iran and China? I know which team I would want to be in. And I think that your prime minister has chosen very wisely as well.
What do you think is going to happen as far as the number of countries that Israel has the support of? Biden administration has been asking Israel to not expand the war into Lebanon. We don't know what's going to happen after, of course, Israel claimed, killing a Hezbollah commander in Beirut. What are you hearing from the administration as far as the U.S. involvement is concerned?
I understand. Fine. Excellent question. So, if actually the Americans want to stop escalation into Lebanon, the place where they have to go is to Tehran. There's no point in discussing that in Beirut, because in Beirut is now run by the Iranian army of Lebanon, right? Hezbollah control it. So they are bigger than the Lebanon. There's this kind of other Lebanese army, but it's not it's in effect a vessel state now within the Iranian army. What do the Americans want to achieve? They have elections, right? They have two aims. Number one, they want to get this IMEC up and running because it's been paused. Your prime minister actually signed it with President Biden last year. Biden flew over to Delhi for the signing together with MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi, and the head of the EU. He wants to get that up and running because it's essential to American security and American prosperity going forward. The Europeans want it signed because it's the only way they can wean themselves off Russian gas and Russian hydrocarbons. Okay, but the Americans also have elections, and when there's elections, they want to make sure that the price of oil remains low and that there's as much stability as possible, and that there isn't hyperinflation. So the Americans themselves are confused about this, which is why you're hearing mixed messages. And I actually think if you listen closely to what's being said, both from the Biden-Harris camp and also from the Trump camp, the same message is more or less the same, which is we support Israel, but we need to finish this as soon as possible. Each of them says it in their own way, but the overall
you don't see any difference between the Biden-Harris camp's messaging and Trump-Vance's camp's messaging as far as this war, this situation is concerned.
In terms of substance, no. In terms of window dressing, yes. They're using different words, but the words mean the same things.
All right. As far as Israel is concerned, what is the larger consensus in Israel? What are the people? What is the administration? What are the authorities talking about? What is the next step? Because at some point in time, Israel has to arrive at a point wherein it can say that it feels safe. And of course, the 120 hostages, which are still with Iran-backed, militias, is that even a possibility which is being discussed in Israel? And if yes, what's the route to that situation?
Excellent question. So we don't view these as I say, Iranian-backed militias or proxies. Proxies that you have an internet proxy, a server proxy. This is the Iranian army. Okay, so therefore, if we want to deal with the Iranian army in Gaza, we understand that we have to deal with it in Tehran, etc. Now, in order to achieve our aims, and our aims are number one,
what does that mean? Have to dealing with them in Tehran. What does that mean? Do you mean a direct attack?
It means that there has to be deterrence in Tehran such that they do not use their armies around the Middle East to attack
What kind of deterrence? What kind of deterrence?
So that deterrence will be defined by both the political levels here as well as by the military here. But in terms of the aims of what we want to achieve, deterrence is obviously important for long-term security and long-term economic growth and success, and for the entire Middle East to flower and improve. But in terms of immediate aims, we have to get our hostages home. You can probably see it. It is unbearable that 300 days on, I still have to wear this. It is unbelievable that is the case. Well, it's 2024. So that is number one. Number two, we have to ensure that we have over 100,000 internal refugees in Israel who are unable to return to their homes and live normal, safe lives. We have to make sure that they can go back. And number three, we have to bring long-term security and prosperity to the region, which has to be done and can only be done through Israeli-Saudi normalization and the implementation of the same IMEC that your Prime Minister so wisely signed off on in September of last year.
As far as the collateral loss of life is concerned, there are several people who are not armed combatants in Gaza and in other areas around Israel, including, of course, in Beirut and Tehran now, who have lost their lives. What would you say as far as that, the loss of innocent lives is concerned?
So, firstly, from a humanitarian perspective, the loss of innocent lives is horrendous. Obviously, the grandmother, the mother, the baby who's 3 years old, they are not responsible. Well, let's start with the children, actually, right? Children who, really young children, they don't know what's going on. And it's horrendous, and I feel for them, and it is genuinely awful. When we start hitting teenagers, there's often numbers, you define a child as somebody under the age of 18. But large parts of the Iranian army in Gaza, what's called Hamas, okay, are 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds with RPGs, with rifles. Are they children? If you're a 15-year-old with an RPG firing at us, are you a child? So under international law, you are. In reality, are you? And then when it comes to the legal side of these issues.
And the counter argument, of course, is, A, occupation, of course, B, the other things that which Palestinians keep talking about, that at the end of the day, their lives are also being made difficult by Israel's actions.
Yeah, so let's discuss that. The two main areas from which Iran has been attacking Israel, as you know, are from Gaza and from Lebanon. Israel does not occupy Gaza. Israel withdrew from all of Gaza. It was actually asked by Fatah, who are the Palestinian government in the West Bank, to keep control of the border with Egypt in order to prevent Hamas smuggling weapons. And Israel said, we cannot do that because that would, in effect, involve us still occupying part of Gaza. So Israel had no occupation whatsoever of Gaza, and yet the Iranian army there decided to attack. In terms of Lebanon, Israel left Lebanon in 2000, over 24 years ago. So the argument that it's occupation that does this, it makes no sense. The only place where you can make any kind of argument of Israeli military occupation would be in certain parts of what we call Judea and Samaria, and they call the West Bank. And there the Palestinians have self-rule, and there's obviously very complex security issues, because do we want to have the entire border open with Jordan where they can smuggle in similar weapons? You saw with a very small border with Egypt what they brought in, what would come in from the border with Jordan into the West Bank, and that's 10 kilometers from a major international airport and from 10 million Israeli citizens, Israeli Jews, Israeli Arabs, Israeli Druze, Christians, Muslims, etc. So
and what would you say about
it's a four-man argument, it's nonsense. It doesn't hold any water. But you touch on something.
You're also dismissing what ICJ's declaration was.
No, I know. Yeah. Fine. So thank you for raising it. So I was going to say that's the other part of it. Listen, a lot of the international law that you as used and quoted were laws that were written after the Second World War. Okay, so the mindset that was used was you've just had Nazi Germany together with its fascist partners, both in Italy, in Japan, and in other parts of the world, who tried to take over the world as nation states and create a global fascist empire. So the laws were set up in order to prevent states doing that in future. And if there is future war, how you protect innocents during those battles. It doesn't prevent war, but it says if war is happening between states, this is what you must do. What Iran has done so cleverly in order to get around it is, despite having its army in various places, it's got journalists around the world using the word proxies, using the word terror organizations, using the word backed militias, and therefore none of them fall under international law. So in effect, states have to keep by laws which other states don't keep by because they use these funny made up terms of proxies. There is no way India will be able to fight a major war going forward if all the people attacking them are not states, because they're defined in. There's no way America will be able to do it. If I can put it this way, the international law is no longer fit for purpose. In the same way as when the internet came and changed our reality, the laws had to catch up. And now AI, artificial intelligence, is coming and is challenging everything what we know about copyright law.
Mr. Newman, before I let you go, I'll say two things. Of course, one will be a question and one would be an invitation to a larger debate. Of course, we will try and have as many sides represented as possible. And I'm not talking about extremists here, of course, but of course there are people who have counter arguments to what you have said during the interview, a lot of those things. So we'll try and set up a larger sort of longer interview and perhaps even a debate if possible very soon. But having said that, let me quickly, before I let you go, ask you this last question. What role do you think India can play in this situation?
It's an excellent question. So India, I think, has three main roles it can play. The first is it is the largest country now in the world and the largest democracy in the world. Therefore, what India says and does has huge impact on the future of the world, and it must use its power wisely in order to be in the pro-democratic, pro-Western camp. That's number one. Number two, India is one of the few countries that actually understands the psychology and the methodologies of radical Islam and the danger that poses to the modern world. So that using that knowledge wisely is of essence. And thirdly, the most successful Muslims in the Western world who have integrated the best, who are an integral part of the success of the Western world and Western democracies, are Indian Muslims. I see it in the UK. You look at second, third generation of Indian diaspora, whether Indian Hindus or Indian Muslims, they have succeeded above and beyond their numbers. You compare that to Pakistani Muslims who've come to the West, they have no way near succeeded. And I think the reason for that is that at the heart of the Indian project was an understanding that we have to find political systems that allow people of different faiths and different religions to live together and succeed together. You've managed to do it in India, and you've managed to export that model to the rest of the world. And that has to be a model for other Muslims around the world, because there's over 1 billion Muslims in the world, and most of those Muslims are good, decent people, but they need to have role models. Indonesia can be a role model, but I think India is a major model for how modern Muslims can be a part of the democratic, free, and open world. So please, they say in Star Wars, with great power comes great responsibility. So please use your power wisely.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Newman. It was a great conversation. I mean, because of course there's a lot of curiosity about what's happening in the region, and a situation which can snowball into a World War III kind of a situation. Of course, gets people to watch it even more closely. So thank you for shedding light on all of these aspects. Of course, like I said earlier, we'll try and set up a larger, longer debate if possible on this issue. But thank you for taking other time once again. Thank you.